Hi, everybody. Happy Monday. Hope you guys had a good weekend. I want to get through a few things and get you guys started with your word work and your small group readings. So, a couple things to help you guys out. I'm just going to cover three things. One, I want to talk about what is fantasy as far as the genre. So, we'll talk about what fantasy means as far as genres go. I want to talk about first and third person perspective and what that means, and I'll show you a couple examples of those. And we're going to talk about what a pronoun is. So you guys have an idea of what a pronoun is. We'll cover all of those things, and that should really get you guys started for the week. Let's start with talking about what a fantasy story is. We've actually read two fantasy stories during Read Aloud this year. We read the BFG and we read How to Train Your Dragon. And in both of those are fantasy stories. That is the genre, right? So when we're talking about a genre, other genres could be realistic fiction or science fiction. In this case, we're talking about fantasy stories. Some elements that you might see, it's going to be not true, right? It's a type of fiction story where it is fiction means fake, right? It's a made up story. And it's going to have some supernatural something, right? Something that doesn't occur on Earth, like as a normal thing. It's going to have something like that. You might have characters with magic or things that are magical, some sort of instance of a magic something. You might have animals that act like people, right? So an animal that can respond or talk or do something, it's got a human characteristic, or just things that act like humans that have human characteristics, whether that's a magic lamp or in a magic talking candlestick, right? Like in Beauty and the Beast. Those are things that have human characteristics. Or you might have real people that are in fantastic places, right? So it's real people in this magical world that they're going through actions. Or you could have fantastic creatures like dragons or unicorns in a real situation. So any of those kinds of things help us know that it's a fantasy. So if we start by looking at a story like the BFG, for example, right? It is not true. It's a fiction story. And if we look at the things that the story contains as far as the BFG goes, it has supernatural occurrences, right? Like these dreams that they catch. We've got characters with magical powers, right? We've got a giant that can catch dreams. Not so many things with magical powers. No animals necessarily with human characteristics. Things with human characters, maybe a giant kind of falls under that thing. It's got giants in it. You do have a real person in a fantastic place. You have Sophie going to the dream country and the giant country, where you have a real person in these fantastic places. And you also have things like giants going into real places like Buckingham Palace. So if we look at the BFG, it's got a lot of these characteristics. If I switch over and talk about How to Train Your Dragon, in this case, again, we've got a story that's not true. And this one has a few less of these characteristics. For example, supernatural occurrences. I suppose dragons in general could fall under that. But you've got these characters with magic powers. Again, I think dragons kind of cover that. Not so many things with magic powers, animals with human characteristics. You do see that in How to Train Your Dragon, because we've got these animals that talk and have characteristics like greed. You do have not so many things with human characteristics. The characters in How to Train Your Dragon really are similar to real people, but they live on this island that's covered in dragons. So it's kind of like that, but less of. But you also still have some characters in real situations too. So both of these stories are fantasy, and we know that because of following these. So anytime you're dealing with things, if you have talking animals, that's going to be a dead giveaway. If you have talking animals, that's going to be a fantasy story where they're communicating, where these animals are communicating with people. That's going to give you kind of a heads up. A lot of times you might see things with kings and queens, not always. Not always, but like in How to Train Your Dragon, you've got the leader of a tribe. There's a queen in the BFG, but that's actually a real one. So those are kind of two dead giveaways. The talking animals is a big one. Anything, if you have something with magic or powers that don't exist, right? Some sort of powers, right? That's going to be there. If you've got people that can float or people that can turn something into another animal or any of that kind of stuff, those would be supernatural occurrences. So those magics and powers, those are all kind of clues that it's going to be fantasy. Pronouns. We're going to talk about pronouns. A noun, the root word here, a noun is anything that's a person, place, thing, or idea. Anything that describes these is a noun. But I'm not just talking about nouns, I'm talking specifically about pronouns. So when we talk about nouns, it's a person, place, thing, or idea. Pronouns are a specific type of noun. And when we use pronouns, we're replacing something with another word. Here's some common pronouns. I, you, he, she, it, we, they, you, they, me, you, him, her, it, us, you, them. When we use those, it's called a pronoun. It's going in place of something more specific. So down here, I've got a sentence. And this is a sentence that is not grammatically wrong. It just sounds really weird. It says, Mr. S went to Mr. S's car and got the class some ice cream. I could use some pronouns in here, but it depends on who's telling the story. If this is me, Mr. S, talking, me is a pronoun, I might say instead of Mr. S went to Mr. S's car to get the class some ice cream, I might say I went to my car and got you some ice cream. Okay, and that sounds better than Mr. S went to Mr. S's car and got the class some ice cream. I went to my car and got you some ice cream. Now, what if Mr. Ritchie came into the room and wondered where I was? He didn't know where I was. The class, you guys might respond, he went to his car and got us some ice cream. So either way, you're talking about the same thing, but it depends on who's talking and which pronouns we use. If this is me telling the story, I might say, I went to my car and got you some ice cream. If it's you guys talking, because somebody walked in and wanted to know where I was, you might say, he went to his car and got us some ice cream. And all of that ties in with perspective. Perspective. When we're talking about perspective, there's a first person and there's a third person. All right. When we're talking about first person, I like to compare this to video games. All right. So for a first person perspective, you guys might have played some video games that are a first person perspective. So things like Minecraft or Fortnite. In those games, you control the character. You see the world as the character sees it, right? When you're playing Minecraft, you see exactly what the character sees. You can look left, you can look right. The character is informing you on what's happening in the world, right? If we read a story in first person perspective, they're going to say words like the character is going to talk about how I did something, we did something. That is them over there. Okay? This story is happening to us, right? So this is a first person story where it's told from the perspective of the character. The character is telling us the story of what's happening to them. They're looking left, they're looking right. I am looking left. We are going there. A third person narrative or story is not from the person's perspective. It's somebody else telling the story of what happened. So, for example, when you play Angry Birds, you don't see the video game from the perspective of the bird flying into the pigs, or you don't see the story from the pig's perspective of having birds flying into the buildings. You see everything. You can zoom in, you can zoom out, you see everything. And that's why this is a third person perspective. Same if you were playing Super Smash Brothers. Right? You don't play the game as Donkey Kong. You see the world that Donkey Kong is in. All right? Same with Banjo, right? You're seeing the world that they are in. You're not seeing it from their perspective. Now, games like Minecraft and Fortnite, you can usually switch between first person and third person, so you can see the world that they're in. But I've got two examples here of them being in first person. This is the world as they see it, as the character sees it, right? When we read some of our stories, the story of our last story of Shredder Man was told in first person, right? We saw the story as Nolan saw it. So Shredder Man was a first person story. Nolan Bird is telling us the story. He's telling us what he sees. He's telling us what is going on. He's explaining exactly as he sees it. A third person story, there's someone else telling us what is going on, right? They're explaining as they see it. The character did this, the character did that. This is how they felt, right? And they know everything that's going on. In Shredder Man, Nolan can only tell us what Nolan sees and what Nolan knows. In a third person story, there's one person telling us exactly what's going on. This is how all the characters feel. This is what's going on. And so I like to think of it as video games. Again, here, this is first person. We see exactly what they see, what the character sees. In third person, we see everything. We know exactly what's happening. We aren't seeing it from the perspective of a character. We see everything. So that makes it a third person. So right now, talk about some different examples of first person and third person. We know this usually using the different pronouns. In a first person, you see I, we, us. In a third person story, you might talk about he or she or they. All the characters are referred to they or them. Sometimes less here. But that's how it is used. So hopefully that makes sense to you. If you have questions, you can ask Miss Erickson. Before you guys do ask, there is a second person. I know that's probably somebody is thinking there's a first, there's a third, is there a second? There is, and that's when like their characters are telling you the story and you're a character in it, and you don't have to worry too much about it. You guys only need to know first and third right now. But there is a second person. It's not very common. So I hope you guys have a great day, and I will talk to you later.